Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadata Satasi Srimad Abhayacharya Naravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadata Satasi Srimad Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinata Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Gita Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai. Tulasi Devi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtana ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gadanga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnanachana Salakaya Chakshur Umilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, who has opened my eyes, which were blinded by the darkness of ignorance, with the torchlight of knowledge. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paska Chadesha Tatine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasudev Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nasta Pareshu Abhadreshu, Rapareshu Abhadresh, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke, Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is practically destroyed, and loving service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So readings from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 21, text number 12 and 13. We're going to just do the Sanskrit for the verse 12, and then I'll read the verse 13. Na kamayeham gatim ishvarati param. Mayeham gatim ishvarat param. Astardi yuktam apunar bhavamba. Artim prabhadye kila deha bhajam. Antastito yena bhavantya dukha. Na kamayeham gatim ishvarat param. Astadhi yuktam apunar bhavamba. Artim prabhadye kila deha bhajam. Antasito yena bhavyadu adya dukha. Can you all see this? Can you? Okay, so let's see. Gentlemen, let's hear you chant. Nakamaham gatim ishvarat param astardayuktam apurnarbhavamba artim prapacche kila dehabhajam atanti orena bhavancha dukha. Somebody else? Nakamayayam gairishvara param astardayuktam apunarbhavamba atim prapacche kila dehabhajam atanena bhavyanta dukha. Nakamayeham gatim ishvarat param astardayuktam apunarbhavamba artim prapacche kila dehabhajam antasito yena bhavancha dukha. Nakamayeham gatim ishvarat param astardayuktam apurnarbhavamba artim prapacche kila dehabhajam antasito yena bhavancha dukha. Nakamayeham gatim ishvarat param astardayuktam apurnarbhavamba artim prapacche kila dehabhajam antasito yena bhavancha dukha. Nakamayeham gatim ishvarat param astardayuktam apurnarbhavamba artim prapacche kila dehabhajam antasito yena bhavancha dukha. Anybody else? Na, not. Kamaye, desire. Aham, I. Gatim, destination. Vishvarat, from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Param, great. Astadidha composed of the 8 kinds of mystic perfection. Apunabhavam, cessation of repeated birth, liberation, and salvation. Va, either. Artim, sufferings. Prapadye, I accept. Akila dehabhajam, of all living entities. Antastita, staying among them. Yena, by which. Bhavanti, they become. Adukkha, without distress. Translation and purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I do not pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the 8 perfections of mystic yoga, nor for salvation from repeated birth and death. I want only to stay among all the living entities and suffer all distresses on their behalf, so that they may be freed from suffering. Please repeat. I do not pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the 8 perfections of mystic yoga, nor for salvation from repeated birth and death. I want only to stay among all the living entities and suffer all distresses on their behalf, so that they may be freed from suffering. Purport. Vasudeva Datta made a similar statement to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, requesting the Lord to liberate all living entities in his presence. Vasudeva Datta submitted that if they were unfit to be liberated, he himself would take all their sinful reactions and suffer personally so that the Lord might deliver them. A Vaishnava is therefore described as being paradukha-dukhi, very much aggrieved by the sufferings of others. As such, a Vaishnava engages in activities for the real welfare of human society. So I'll just read text number 13. Kshutrip shramokatra param brahmascha dayam klamaso kavisha sharamoha sarve nivrita kripanasya jantar jiji vishorjiva jalarpaname. Translation. By offering my water to maintain the life of this poor Chandala who is struggling to live, I have been freed from all hunger, thirst, fatigue, trembling of the body, moroseness, distress, lamentation, and illusion. So, this is such a wonderful story that sometimes we think about it as a great feat on Rantideva's part that he could be so tolerant. But I would like to understand his motives more in terms of his care of suffering living beings. So he was so exalted that he saw everyone and everything in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, he completely engaged his mind, his words, and his very self in the service of the Supreme Lord and his devotees. Rantideva was so exalted that sometimes he would give away his own food in charity, and he and his family would then have to fast because there was no food. But one time, the context of these verses is that Rantideva had been fasting for 48 days, and he wasn't even drinking water. So his servants brought, when it was the time to break his fast, that his servants brought him an enormous plate of rich food made with ghee. We can imagine a little bit when we fast for Janmashtami that after fasting not just 12 hours or 24 hours, but 48 hours, how much a person would appreciate eating at that time due to fatigue and hunger. So Rantideva, after fasting 48 days, not even drink of water, he's sitting down now with this huge plate of prasadam. And right when he was getting ready to eat it, then a brahmana shows up. He's like sitting there with his spoon ready to eat. And instead of eating, he understood that he needed to share one portion of what he had. So he gave a portion of his food to the brahmana so that he could take. And when the brahmana left, Rantideva was all ready to now finish his meal or even begin his meal. He was just about ready to put something in his mouth, and then a Sudra showed up. Can't imagine how hard that would be. Yeah. So then Rantideva, very dutifully, he divided up the remaining food between this Sudra and himself. And so he thought, well, I now get ready to eat that little bit that's there on my plate. And he was just about ready to put something in his mouth when another guest suddenly appeared, asking for food. So Rantideva gave him the rest bit of the food. There probably wasn't a whole lot left, so he gave him the whole bit, the whole piece. And he thought, well, now at least let me quench my thirst. I've been fasting from water and food for several days. And he was getting ready to drink his water, and somebody else showed up. It was a Chandala also coming to beg for water. So Rantideva, he gave even the water. This is an interesting thing. As I'm reading this, I'm thinking as a person who often accompanies people at the time of death and have seen people at that time, we know that if you don't have food or water for 7 days, that's generally the moment where you leave your body, at least the water you need. So 48 hours is 2 days in, 2 days in. You may feel some fatigue, but it is a big indication that when you're not taking food and water, your body gets the message that you're dying in some way. So you have heart palpitations, and you may feel dizzy, and as your body starts to purify itself, you may feel some toxic release. So it explains in this verse that after Karntideva heard the pitiful words of a poor fatigued Chandala begging for water, he says, I do not pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the 8 perfections of mystic yoga, nor for salvation from repeated birth and death. I want only to stay among all living entities and suffer all distresses on their behalf, so that they may be freed from suffering. So some of the language in these verses people may not understand. 8 mystic opulences or perfections. Who can tell me what they are? Do you know them off the top of your head? Anybody? What are these 8 perfections of mystic yoga? Anybody know what they are? Yeah? Nobody? What? Well, I can read them. I just wanted to see how much you all knew, but yeah. Let me read an explanation. The mystic yogis who practice different types of austerities for attainment of 8 kinds of material perfection and who ultimately meet the supreme soul's paramama in trance are called siddhikami, or those who desire the perfection of becoming finer than the finest, becoming heavier than the heaviest, getting everything they desire, having control over everyone, creating everything liked, and so on. So all these abilities are achieved by a powerful yogi. So there's 2 things in there I think that are very attractive, that you can control everyone. Wouldn't that be nice if you could control everyone, and that you could get everything you wanted? It sounds like a magic touchstone. So King Rantideva, he had no interest in any kind of material or even spiritual perfection, and these cities also ultimately allow a person to perceive and have a connection with this Lord in our heart, which is something we all want as devotees. He didn't even desire that in terms of a perfection. And so this is astonishing, because most people are practicing some kind of spiritual pursuits. They're seeking some kind of material or spiritual reward, like becoming free from the cycle of birth and death. And many of us have the goal, as we practice spiritual life, we have the goal that we want to become free from this world of suffering, and we want to go back home to Godhead. And these seem like very admirable goals to have. I mean, nobody can argue that's a really good thing to desire. But here, Rantideva is saying that he had no interest at all in becoming free from death. And this is a big deal. I mean, you talk about birth and death. But in order to have death, you have to have birth. So once you're born, death is inevitable. And if you really think closely about why we do what we do in this material world, you will really come down to the bottom of it, is that our primary motivation for doing anything in the material world is because we're afraid of dying. Practically everything we do is an attempt to struggle for survival. From the time we take birth, our parents and society start preparing us for the hard struggle for survival. For example, right from the start, our parents train us in the basic life skills so we can navigate the world. They teach us how to feed ourselves in a socially acceptable way. They teach us how to go to the toilet in a socially acceptable way. They teach us words so that we can communicate our basic human needs to others, so that we can find food and shelter and safety. And they teach us how to conform to socially acceptable habits and values, so we can belong to a particular culture or a social system. And since the beginning of time, people and animals have belonged to a tribal community or some sort of community in order to survive. You know, you have a gaggle of geese, you have a herd of cows, you have, I don't know, a school of fish, but people and animals tend to, for protection, they join together. You have to find your people to feel safe. And although modern civilization seems pretty polished, we pride ourselves with living in a very advanced culture. Underneath the surface of what we see, all of us are trying very hard to forget that we're dying. So much so that death is the last thing any of us wants to talk about or think about until we're actually dying. And this is also true for Krishna devotees. You know, I've noticed that. We don't want to talk about that, because that's the sad reality of our existence. We get busy making a million plans for the future when none of us know that we will even be alive tomorrow. That's the real reality of it. So as a devotee, I find that very interesting, especially considering that our central religious text, Srimad Bhagavatam, that we're reading from today, is a conversation that started in response to a king's question. What is the duty of a man who is about to die? And he was cursed by a Brahmin boy to die in 7 days. And who of us in this room knows that we will even be alive for the next 7 days? So the purport of the Bhagavatam is, get ready. This is really coming. This is the practice. How do we practice dying every day? So in this verse 12, Rantideva is telling us that he doesn't want anything for himself from the material world. Not any kind of gross or subtle material perfection. Nor does he desire to be free from death. That's a pretty courageous desire, to let that go. And that all he wants is to stay among all the living beings and suffer all their distresses on their behalf so that they may be freed from suffering. This is a very unusual desire of Rantideva, comparatively, when you think of what people want in this world, or what their goal of life is. Because typically when we see other people suffering, what do? We feel disgusted, or we feel relieved that it's not us that's suffering. We might even enjoy that someone else is suffering. We may not say that to them. We may be thinking, oh, they're getting what they deserve, or that's their karma. And we try to avoid suffering people because they make us feel uncomfortable, so we turn away. Now, as a professional chaplain, many of you don't know me, and some people in this room know me and work with me as a devotee, but I'm a professional chaplain, and that may not be something many of you are familiar with, but my primary work in this material world as a devotee is to accompany suffering people in a time of crisis. So that means I'm going into hospitals, I'm going into hospices, sometimes jail. I do prison ministry also. You might be in a senior care home. You might be sitting with a devotee also who's suffering. And but part of the work is that you're 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, if not more, going bed to bed to bed and listening to hours and hours of the suffering that people are undergoing. Sometimes these visits involve being bedside with a homeless person who actually has maggots coming out of their nose. These are things I have seen in a hospital. Or I'm sitting with an incarcerated pregnant woman whose feet are chained to the bed. I've seen that too, many times. Sometimes it means sitting with a young married couple as they watch their infant baby die, and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. Or being present with a person who failed an attempt to kill themselves. Or praying with a person who is anxious about having brain surgery in the next 24 hours, and they don't know if they will wake up at all, or they will be paralyzed from the neck down when they come out of surgery, which often happens. Or sometimes I'm playing a harp to put a person with a spinal cord injury to sleep because they are so uncomfortable, and that's the only thing that can help them. Often when I tell people what I do as a chaplain, they will say, oh my God, how could you do such a service, a work? Why would you do that? That's many times devotees say, why would you do this kind of work? It's a pretty macabre work, it's a gross work, it's a sad work. I could never do such kind of work. It's too stressful. I don't want to trouble my mind with the sufferings of other people. And these statements are always surprising to me because in the nearly 20 years since I have been doing this work, I have come to realize that having a hand in relieving human suffering gives me a deep sense of satisfaction and even joy. In fact, chaplains are some of the happiest people I know because they are confronting life as it is, moment to moment, by embracing life's painful realities, particularly the reality that we are dying each day. Each moment. Sometimes I have an image of we're sitting in God's waiting room, like you're in a doctor's room. And any minute the nurse will come out and say, next, and it's your turn. And death will happen like that for many of us. We may not think that maybe tonight in our sleep we will die. No one knows that. When I talk to people in the hospital, they will say to me, if I had known this would have happened today, I would have done something different. I would have had somebody feed my pets. I would have given somebody my credit card number or something. But we don't know that. So the message in that is we need to be ready now. It's not about making some huge plans and hoping for that. Although Prabhupada did say we have to make plans as if we are going to live forever, but live as if this were our last day. So balancing these two pieces of ourself, the part of ourself that is not eternal, our bodies, they will die, but there's a part of us who will live forever. So how do we straddle these two parts of ourselves? It's kind of a paradox we live in. You know, we're living between birth and death, and people who join people in their suffering with the intention to relieve their suffering, they find true happiness. And this was King Rantideva's realization in this story, that he realized that he wants to join suffering people in times of suffering because, and this is the quote, offering his water to maintain the life of a poor, vulnerable person who is struggling to live frees himself from all personal suffering like hunger and thirst, fatigue, trembling of the body, moroseness, distress, lamentation, and illusion. So he says this, that the reason why I do this is because it frees me from my suffering to help relieve others' human suffering. So how is this possible? In plain English, we're really talking about the paradox, the reality that when we support people in their most difficult time, we become free ourselves from absorption in our own problems. So I know from my own experience that when my mind is absorbed in trying to be an agent of compassionate care for others, I forget completely about my own suffering. Suddenly my problems seem to be that big compared to the person in front of me. I'm no longer a victim of this world, lamenting and blaming and trying to find a comfortable situation, because guess what? There's nothing in this world that's comfortable all the time. So sitting with people who are in a very difficult situation is probably the most sacred way to meet Krishna face to face in that moment, sitting with someone, particularly who's about to die, and journeying with them in that. So this is a very important secret to the way the world works, that if we absorb our minds in thinking of ways to relieve human suffering, then we are no longer held hostage by our own suffering. And this is the heart of the mission and message of Lord Chaitanya, to offer compassionate care to those suffering from miseries of this material world by giving them the holy name, by giving them food cooked in love and devotion and offered to Krishna, by giving them fellowship. This is one piece that we often miss out. We talk about offering food and books and the holy name. What we don't really pick up on is that Rupa Goswami gave us this wonderful formula for association. 6 loving exchanges, revealing the mind in confidence, listening to someone reveal their mind in confidence, sharing food, sharing story, and sharing time. So without the association of like-minded people, who are caring about us and supporting us in our journey, most of us will not make it to the end. We need each other in order to stay the course. Considering we may not be alive tomorrow, but you may be alive for another 50, 60, 80, 100 years. And you need fellowship with other like-minded people who are on this path. As a conditioned soul, we learn from the time we were born that the goal of life is to struggle very hard to get our basic human needs met, like our survival needs, and our need for love, our need for respect, our need for acceptance, our need for belonging and happiness. We all have these needs, universal needs. It transcends all cultures, all ethnicities, all genders. We all have these basic human needs. And if we study this process closely, we will see that the harder we work to try and get others to love us, get others to respect us, get others to accept us, and give us happiness, the less love, respect, acceptance, and happiness we actually get for ourselves. So it's another secret, open secret to the way the world works. The more we try to get things for ourselves, the more we are takers and not givers. The less everything that we're trying to grab for goes away. If you want love for yourself, if you want something for yourself, you have to give it first. This is the open secret in mastering life in the material world. That if we want to be loved, we have to love first others. If we want to be respected, we have to respect others first. If we want to have an abundant life, we have to give and share our abundance with others first. If we want to be accepted, we have to accept others first. If we want to be happy, we have to be thinking and actively working on how can we make others happy. If we want to continue to learn and grow as a person, we have to help others learn and grow as well. And you can just infinitely think of anything that you want for yourself. Think first how I can give it to others, and then it will come back to you. So that's also an aspect of our karma theory, that whatever we put out comes back to us. And this works both to our benefit in terms of pious activities, doing helpful things, but it also works negatively in the sense that when we do harm to others, then harm is done to us. So whatever we put out, it's like a boomerang. Whatever we do or give to others, it comes back to us. The quality of our consciousness invites the world that we actually create for ourselves. In the verses that immediately follow these two verses, 12 and 13, it says that although Rantideva was on the verge of death because of thirst, Rantideva gave his own portion of water to the Chandala without hesitation. And because he was completely absorbed in trying to relieve human suffering, the material energy did not bewilder him at all. He was completely beyond confusion and the pangs of the material energy. Well, actually, Maya, or the material energy, is a pure devotee of Krishna. Often we give her a bad rap because we always say, oh, you're Maya. Maya is a pure devotee. Her job is to keep the insincere out of the association of Krishna. So she's always testing our sincerity and testing how attached we really are to serving Krishna. And most of us, when we have a little problem or a little challenge in our service, we go, I'm not doing it, sorry. I have a little trouble doing it, so forget it. I'm going out and find that comfortable cushion I can sit on. But when we're fully absorbed in the Lord's mission to relieve human suffering, then automatically we're living in the spiritual world right now, right here, even though we may be still embodied. So sometimes we think in terms of, when we go back to Godhead in the spiritual world, like it's somewhere far off. We're living in a holographic universe. It's right here. We don't see it because we're attached. We're covered by illusion. We're looking through the lenses of goodness, passion, and ignorance. But when we are fully absorbed in loving Krishna and engaging in his service, that veil that keeps us from seeing Krishna right here, right now, starts to go up. We start to see, Krishna's everywhere. He's in me. He's in you. He's in everything that happens. Not a blade of grass moves without Krishna's sanction. Whatever's coming to me is also sent by Krishna. Let me open. Let me hear. Let me learn from it. Lord Chaitanya used to, open his ears when people were criticizing him and close them when they were praising him. And I think this is our example. Lord Chaitanya, he taught us by example. Once we understand that Krishna's mission is to reawaken a person's forgotten love for him, and that he lives within each of our hearts and the hearts of all others, then we start to see that Krishna is in everyone and Krishna is in everything. And with this awareness, we naturally will treat every living being as a sacred part of Krishna, and we become free from absorption in our own material suffering. Most of us know this verse in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, "The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater, or an outcast." A Krishna-conscious person does not make any distinction between species and castes. So this is what we're aspiring for as Krishna Bhaktas, to see Krishna in the heart of everyone, even in our own hearts, and show up in the lives of others, and in our life with compassion for ourselves and all other living beings. Because we're suffering. All of us are suffering. Nobody comes to this material world who's free from suffering, because this is a place to suffer. This is the nature of this world. So everybody who's in this room and in this planet, they're on the same yellow submarine. You know, we're all in that boat. So no need to think that I'm not suffering and you are, or I'm suffering and you're not. We're all have our own unique, tailor-made karma and situations that are challenging. Some of them are different, but they're specific to each one of us and unique. And sometimes we shame ourselves for not living up to some perfect external standard we or others have of what it means to be a devotee. But because every endeavor is covered by fault, it's not possible to achieve some kind of material perfection. We talk a lot like these 8 mystic perfections. You know, some people really get busy trying to be perfect. Get your tilak on crate, get your sari on right, you know, make sure you clap the right way, turn around the right way, and thinking that, you know, Krishna is interested in that, you know, that I'm perfect somehow materially. Krishna's not at all interested in your external behavior. He's interested in your heart. He wants to see what is your attention, your affection. He wants your love, and love as defined as attention, affection, appreciation, affirmation, and giving Krishna the freedom to choose. Lord Chaitanya prays, "You may make me brokenhearted by not being present before me, but I'm still your worshipable Lord unconditionally." That's giving God the freedom to choose, to do with you as he likes. Now that's real love. And that we can extend those 5 different attributes of love, we can extend them to ourselves as well. You know, instead of beating ourselves up for not being good enough all the time, we can also love ourselves, because Krishna is in ourselves as well. And Krishna doesn't create any junk. You know, everything that he's created is a part of him. And so in order to love Krishna, we also have to find that part of Krishna within ourselves and nurture it, give it attention, give it affection, give that part of Krishna that's in ourselves appreciation, and the freedom to also choose and suffer the consequences of our choices as well. We know in the Bhagavad Gita at the very end, Krishna, after he's spoken the whole Bhagavad Gita, he gives Arjuna a choice. That's even love, you know. I give you a choice. You can surrender or not. You can love me or not. Krishna's in our heart waiting for us to turn around and love him. He doesn't force us to do that. That's a characteristic of love. You cannot put a gun to somebody's head and say, "Now love me," because love is voluntary. So this is the bhakti process. It's very different than the karma kandiya process, where I have to earn God's love. We don't think in terms of that we have to earn God's love, like you're dodging karma. I mean, so I talk to sometimes devotees who come from a tradition where it's all the time, oh, gotta step a crack, gotta be careful to step on any crack, because I might invite bad karma. We talk like that. But if you are actually practicing bhakti yoga, and you're really linking every action, thought, you're considering, how can I respond to what's in my world now in a caring way, in a loving way, then all of those karmic things are taken care of. So we can simplify it. This is why the Hare Krishna movement is not a Hindu tradition. It is a Hindu reform movement. Bhakti is about linking everything to God in love. Our relationships, our words, our attitudes, our work, if we worked somehow to dovetail that. So we're not trying to earn God's love. That's not why we do service. We already have God's love. Unconditionally, He loves each and every one of us. Unconditionally. So we don't have to earn it. What we do need to do is say thank you. That's why we serve. We say thank you. You've given me air to breathe. You've given me eyes to see so I can relish your form. You've given me hands, and maybe you have some other facilities. Maybe I have money I can use in Christian service. That's good manners. When you've been given so much, the only good manners or right thing to do is say thank you. And how do we do that? We reciprocate. That's what service is about. It's not about earning. We can often get really hijacked. We get off path, and it becomes a fear of God, which is what earning my way back to Godhead is. It's about fear. I'm a fear of going to hell. I'm afraid of committing offenses and all that. You won't do that if everything you do is seasoned with love. That your intention is to do the most caring thing, even in a most difficult situation. So I'm going to close, and then we will, if there's a minute, we have a few minutes, we can massage this topic, because I do believe that when we talk about a topic and hear reflections from the audience, then we grow as a community. We learn more about the topic. So I'm going to just quote this passage by Srila Prabhupada that's coming from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3:29-6. The Lord is always compassionate towards the fallen souls of this material world, and therefore He comes Himself, or He sends His confidential servants to deliver them. Since He is perpetually compassionate towards them, if some of His devotees also become compassionate towards them, He is very pleased with the devotees. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much. Any insights? Questions, all right, but I'm interested to hear what you have heard. What came up in you? What hit you as I was talking and reading and stuff? What kinds of thoughts and insights came up for you? Yes. We have to think of the context. This is a wonderful story. It's very extreme. I think we do have to care for ourselves. And we have this nice thing in the when you're on the airplane, at least in the United States, they say, well, before you help your child put the oxygen mask on, put that on yourself first. So self-care is really important. And that's also how if we care for ourselves, then we will also have the ability to care for others. And I said this before, but I'm also a Red Cross chaplain that responds to disasters like earthquakes and fires and stuff when something happens. And they have a rule in the Red Cross that if you go out on the field trying to save everybody, because that's what we do, we feel very good about ourselves as saviors, and you might forget to come back to camp. You have a base camp where you have to nourish yourself and then debrief some of the trauma that you're seeing. But in the Red Cross, if you're a volunteer chaplain and you are out there and you don't come back after 8 hours to come and debrief and take care of yourself, they say, thank you very much, we don't need your help. Go home. Why? Because if you don't know how to care for yourself, you have no insight how to care for others. So I would say this is an important awareness for us, because we have this false notion that caring for ourselves is somehow sense gratification. Actually, it's our duty, because this body doesn't belong to me. It's Krishna's. And you wash your car, you fix it, tune it up and stuff, and sometimes we need a tune-up. In order to get the most service out of ourselves, it's good to have health, mental and physical health, right? So this is where every one of us is responsible for making sure that we get our needs met, not expecting others to it, but making sure you get what you need in order to get maximum service for Krishna. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Reflections? Yes, I don't know your names. Nitai Pran, I do know your name.
One of the basic concepts people think is like when you're not working in the chaplain services, somebody comes for help. It's mostly you give advice. And once you give advice, once or twice, they don't listen to it. You kind of think that
Well, first of all, chaplains don't give advice. That's not our job. We are story catchers. And so our job is to be a sounding board for people who have challenges. Many of us go through life crises. We're not psychotherapists. We don't try to fix it for people. But we also understand, because the Supreme Lord is inside of their heart, He's the source of all wisdom, all joy, all eternity, and the solution's in them. That because when you're in a crisis, generally people, when they've had a life crisis, like they've had a car accident, or they've lost their job or lost their health, they regress to the mental maturity of a 3-year-old. People are, you see this in the hospital. You think, this woman, she's 50 years old, or this man's 50 years old, they're running a business, and now they've had a crisis, and they're hyperventilating, and they're making all kinds of strange comments. That's a common thing. So what we try to do is to help listen and explore with them, give them a space to explore their thoughts and feelings. And we may make some suggestions for resources. A person may need more care than we can give, so we have a whole referral system for psychotherapists and counselors and stuff. But our job is mainly to join a person in their suffering moment and accompany them and help them find their way out, so they're not alone. Because the most suffering is to be alone in the midst of suffering, not the suffering. So that's a short answer. Yeah. Anything else? Yes. Speak up. I don't know if they can hear you back there.
Only yesterday I made my Guru Maharaj, Devamrit Maharaj, writing I was saying that the material world really sucks and I really wanted to get out of here. But my guilt feeling is, why do I want to get out of this world? Because I don't want to suffer. But why not it be like, I love Krishna, that's why I wanted to go back to Krishna. So my question was like, how do I develop that pure love that I'm not trying to get out of this world because I want to escape the suffering? And then I came in this morning and I saw that lines and I was like somebody's asking, give me all the sufferings, I don't want to do. It was, I felt like Krishna was talking to me with those lines.
Queen Kunti does something like that as well, right? Because when we are in a suffering moment, what do? We start praying. Even atheists start praying. They say there's no atheists in foxholes, If you ask, a lot of times we will ask people, well, what helps you at a time like this? That may be a question. Somebody's come in, they've had a terrible accident, or they've got a fright. And say, what helps you cope at a time like this? And they'll go, the man upstairs. They may have never gone to any church or temple or anything, but suddenly they're very religious, That's a common thing. But crises, we understand as chaplains, when we have an external crisis, it's really a spiritual crisis. We have probably ignored many of the small whispers of our conscience, or Krishna in the form of our conscience and intuition. We've ignored those little voices again and again and again, and so now the voices get louder, and smack, now you are having a car accident because you're drinking and driving, or you're watching your cell phone while you're driving, or you're gabbing and you're driving, and you haven't been paying attention. So how do we get there? I think for me that the thing that has helped me the most is to realize going back to Godhead is really an inner journey. It's not about going somewhere physically. I've got to escape. That's what liberation is. I think that if I leave this situation, that I will escape the suffering of this moment. What is really happening is that wherever you go, your karma goes with you. So it's not about where you're going to leave, where you're going to go, because even in death, your karma goes with you. So better than running away is to turn around and ask the question, what is the message in this moment that is trying to get through to me, that I've had to have such a painful experience to, capture my attention? Because most of us are living asleep to the self. We're just walking around, bumping off of people, being reactive and blaming everybody. And, Prabhupada says you don't blame the deliverer of your karma. And so it's very liberating to stop running away from yourself and just focus on being humble and honest about yourself, and learn to say many times, I'm an idiot. I'm a complete idiot. And not try to pretend you're more than you are, because guess what? We're all here, fallen. You can't hide. Who are you hiding from? Krishna knows everything. So you might as well just live as if Krishna's sitting next to you and have that conversation. Teach me, help me, give me an idea. What am I supposed to learn that I'm not able to hear from others? You know? And then you'll find that you're in the spiritual world all the time. Yeah. Anything else? Thoughts, comments? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Well, that's kind of a carryover from the culture. You know, it's a culture conditioning faith in those kinds of things. I'm certain that it helps something. You know, feng shui and all that stuff. Astrology, people get busy with that. Prabhupada said, clap 3 times and all your astrology changes. You know, we have kind of an escape route. But it's kind of a social conditioning. I was explaining how at the time of birth your parents are putting all kinds of superstitions and things that their grandmother said and their grandmother said and their grandmother said. And nobody knows why they said it or did it. It's just my granny did it. I lived in Vrindavan in India for 10 years, and that was one observation I met. I saw the villagers coming and, you know, standing in front of the deity and doing this and twirling around 3 times. And I said, what are they doing? Prabhupada never taught us that. What's that about? You know, and, you know, one day I got curious. I said, what are you doing? What does it mean? I wanted to know. Maybe there's some Brijwasi thing I need to know. And I don't know. But my granny always took me to the temple, and she did it. And I do it now because she did it. And I teach my kids to do it, but I don't know why we do it. So I think we all, in all cultures, we inherit these things. We need to read these books of Srila Prabhupada. Part of the reason we even read other books is because we have doubts. And those doubts are given to us by our cultural conditioning. There's a nice story I told in New Govardhan about this, similar, that when the deities were installed in Vrindavan, Prabhupada told the organizers that we have to invite, we do all these pujas, all of these rituals, in order to satisfy the smarta brahmanas here in Vrindavan, because they won't have faith that just by chanting the holy name, that's enough. That's enough to purify everything and to install these deities. So he said, but they won't take us seriously, our movement seriously, if we don't do that. So on the basis of that, and many other places in his purports, where he says, you know, all this purification ritual, you can sit down anywhere and chant Hare Krishna, and it will purify body, mind. You know, just sit down and chant. But it's sad to see that people, you know, don't have that faith that the holy name is enough. It satisfies everything. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Reflecting on the rituals which you have gone through, is it important for one to have the remembrance of the lordships before they do the charity?
Good question. This is a really good question, because I've struggled with this as well. I think armed with yoga, stand and fight. I think if we're just busy, and we're not conscious of what we're doing it and why we're doing it and who we're doing it for, then it's just action. You know, it's a pious activity. You do get positive results. But if you're doing it in terms of serving Krishna, if your motivation is to do it as a means of connecting with Krishna, you're connecting with someone else, then it's a whole different yoga process. There's a nice story in Hari Sari's diary. I don't know where. It's something that's stuck in my mind, where he was walking down the street in Calcutta, and there were all these beggars there, And he was talking to Harisari about how devotees don't do philanthropic activities. You know, they're not building hospitals and doing all of these things. Because what happens is, if you give charity, that person who you're giving charity to, and you have to take birth again because they owe you now, right? So they're walking down, they're having this conversation, and there's some beggar sitting on the side, and Prabhupada leans over to Harisari and says, give me some paisa so I can give it to these beggars. And Harisari's going, you just now said that we don't do that because, and Prabhupada said, yes, but if you don't look kindly, it makes your heart hardened. So in bhakti we do it. So if you're walking down the street or you see somebody who's suffering and you're ignoring them because you're thinking, oh, it's their bad karma, they deserve that. Now what's happening to your consciousness? Oh, I'm better. I'm self-righteous. And that is a danger in our scripture, that Brahmins tend to be self-righteous. We can get really proud of ourselves. And of course we know from the Ras Leela dance that when we get so proud of ourselves that we think, only Krishna's dancing with me, he leaves that dance. So we may not do it for the same reason. People often are giving charity because they know by law of karma, if I give, it will come back to me, like we were talking here. But in bhakti, we give because if we don't, our heart will be hardened. It has a direct effect on our consciousness. And you can't serve Krishna with love if your heart is hard. So do it. Care for others, you know. It's good for you. Right. You get the immediate result. Yeah. Anything else? I know that it's time for breakfast probably now, so we have to talk. One more thing. Yeah. How do you debrief yourself? Say a little more. What do you mean?
So when we go through some pains of others, or when we hear someone's pain, he said to love yourself. So to love yourself, we need to debrief yourself as well. So how do we debrief?
Well, if I use that word, it was probably the wrong term. Really, we need to be reflecting on what happens to us. And in our Karuna Care program that I founded 4 years ago, we have developed things like listening circles and created connections with devotees who are studying this kind of service. How do we practice bhakti rather than talk so much about it? We talk about love, we don't know how to practice it very well. There's some science and art behind it. How do we understand human behavior? So having a conversation partner who is like-minded that you can trust and who's not going to now bash you over the head with a Bhagavad Gita every time you express that you have a doubt, is a good thing. So I don't know in this community the devotees, but it would be good to find a partner or some people, maybe not here in Sydney, but we have an international network of people who are there to listen. If you're by yourself, though, good idea just to reflect and examine something that happens. You know, we should be digesting our life daily, you know. At the time we're getting ready for bed, reflecting on what happened during the day. What did I learn? Reflecting on how did my behavior impact other people? That's a real blind spot that most of us have. We're very clear on how I like this one, I don't like that one, this guy rubbed me the wrong way, I don't like the way they put their socks on, they have a funny nose, their voice is really cracky. We have the mind is all the time accepting rejection. But other people's minds are doing that about us too. We don't remember that. So it's really helpful to sometimes rehearse or to reflect on particularly a conversation that didn't go well. You walk away from somebody and you have a feeling in your heart, gosh, why did I say that? And I was very loud when I said it, and I wonder what my face looked like, because they were responding to me like in a very angry way. And we're thinking, they're an angry person, and you're not realizing they're responding to you, your face and your loud voice and your, the things you've said. So reflecting on this is a question I ask myself when things happen, particularly hard things. I go back, I do a rewind. You have to trace out, how did I get myself to here, right? It's a whole series of choices that you hear. We create our reality, right? So the question you have to ask yourself is, how did I invite what's happening to me now? And then if you explore it, you start to see, oh, I chose that. Knowingly or unknowingly, I made it happen because of what I said or did, or somebody I didn't talk to or spoke harshly to or talked about and it got back to them or whatever, So it really comes back to you. The two ways we cause pain and suffering is with our tongue. what we eat and what we say. So we can rewind and say, oh boy, I shouldn't have eaten that. I'm guilty of that. I cooked for almost 27 years for the devotees, so I know prasadam, but it doesn't love me back. You know, I get heartburn at this age, and I would eat pizza all day if I could. I just can't digest it. And what we say, you know, knowing not just what we say, but how we say it. Because it's 85% of our communication is body language, facial expression, voice tone, and so. So that's part of our work, as learning how do we communicate care, even in difficult conversations, and we all have them. You know, family conversations, relationships at work and in the temple, we inevitably are going to bump up against each other because we're all in it together. And so we've got to learn that skill, how to say things like "I'm sorry" and "help me understand." It seemed like I hurt you. I don't know what I did. Help me understand. Let's talk about it, rather than talking to other people about it. Learning to communicate clear and directly with the person who you're having trouble with. We tend to go to other people. It doesn't change what's happening between you and that person. You've got to go to that person. And we know this from our scripture of Durvasa Muni. You know, when he was running away from the Sudarshan disc, Brahma says, I can't help you. I can't call it off. The Sudarshan disc is the anxiety we feel when we've offended people, right? So I can't help you. You have to, and Vishnu said, I can't help you either. You've got to go back to the person that you hurt. And with tears in your eyes, you've got to throw yourself at their feet and apologize. And then move forward to heal that. That's not easy to do, but that's the philosophy. All right. Have a great breakfast. So nice meeting you. Lovely temple. Hare Krishna. I brought a few gifts for you all. We were just at the New Govardhan Festival, and we're just advertising the services that we do. It's Karuna Care Association Education, and we teach workshops and things online. And so you may be interested to go to our website. So we have these little prasadam packets that we're giving out. So you're welcome to have one, or maybe you can pass them out. But if you want to know more about chaplaincy and what we do, we're training teams of chaplains in every community. We have a growing chaplain team in Bhaktivedanta Manor, and we have people in Washington D.C. and in Los Angeles, and so maybe there'll be some people who are interested in this sort of topic here, and can create a caring community here in Sydney. So yeah, I don't know. You can pass them out. How much take this? Of course. Yes. Okay, whoops, there you go. Oh, I'm hoping your voice comes back. Oh.